For me, surrender without faith is giving up. The faith underneath is what ultimately makes surrender possible for me, as hard as it is. Hola! Welcome to Sana Sana Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Lopez Tomei. I'm a first-generation Cuban-American woman, breast cancer survivor, and mother of 5. I'm also a certified professional coach. Sana Sana is dedicated to you, Hispanic and Latina breast cancer survivors who've always been the strong ones and now feel lost in their identity after cancer diagnosis. Every week, I'll be sharing the foundation of my ecosystem of healing coaching process, which I use to help my clients restore trust in their bodies, release perfectionism, advocate for themselves, and live from a place of healing and peace rather than survival. Tune in to hear my real-life experiences, carving a new path for myself after remission, but helping my coaching clients carve a new path for themselves too. Hello, sister survivors, and welcome to episode 5 of Sana Sana. I'm recording this on Mother's Day, so I want to take a moment to wish all the moms out there a very happy Mother's Day and Mother's Day week, since you'll be hearing this on Wednesday. Today we're going to talk about tatas and tattoos. Sounds corny, but it's true. And in the process, we'll discuss the 2 things that got me through cancer and the aftermath of survivorship: surrender and faith. How many of you have heard this Aramaic phrase before? Tabitha Koum. It means little girl, get up. If you grew up in church like I did, you know the story. It comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, verse 41. And in that story, Jesus is called to a house where a little girl has died. A 12-year-old girl, I believe, has died. And he walks into the room where she is, and he speaks these words to her, Tabitha Koum, which mean, little girl, get up. And in 2016, as you all know, I went through a very difficult time, a very difficult experience, something that really just broke me open. And it was a cancer diagnosis, treatment, and followed by almost 10 years of survivorship. I experienced loss, and after treatment, I returned to a life that I no longer recognized. And when you're in that space of diagnosis and the shock that comes with a cancer diagnosis, treatment, and I think this is true whether the treatment that you receive is very invasive or not. Just the impact of a diagnosis is enough, I think, for you to experience this loss. And then everything that comes after, especially at first, after your diagnosis and after your treatment. But even 10 years into survivorship, like I am, sometimes you're trying to figure out how to get up from all of that, or how to get back up and rejoin life. And I don't mean just physically. I don't mean just from a practical standpoint, but from inside, in your spirit, in your faith, in that inner part of you that nobody talks about when you're going through treatment and when you finish treatment. So today I'm talking about surrender and faith and how they got me through cancer and how I tap back into it when I forget that I need both. I'm not coming at you as a person who has it all figured out, but as a woman who is still practicing surrender and faith every single day. By the end of this episode, I want you to have a language for what you've been feeling and permission to still be figuring it out. What the heck is she talking about? You're thinking. I have a tattoo on my left forearm that reads Tabitha Koum. Give me a second while I take off my watch to show it to you. Hopefully you can see it there. And like I explained just a couple minutes ago, it's Aramaic for little girl, get up, or little girl, I say to you, arise. And it's from the Gospel of Mark. It's Jesus raising a 12-year-old girl from the dead with these words. And I see it every single day. And on a hard day, whether it's a hard day at work or in my personal life or just a hard day to be human in the world, I look down at my forearm and I read those words. And I imagine Jesus extending his hand out to me and with love and patience encouraging me to get up, to face the day, to face myself. And that 2-word command locks me in and reminds me to get up and show up. Those words remind me that I'm not alone. From my biological family to my chosen family to my community and friends, there's always someone standing there with their arms outstretched, not only inviting me to rise to the occasion, but also assuring me that they're going to be there to support me after I get up. I want to talk to the cancer survivors in the room for a moment. If you're a cancer survivor who's trying to figure out who you are on the other side of treatment, stay with me today. And if you want to do this work one-on-one, I'd love to be your survivorship coach. You can book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. And as always, the link is in the show notes. So we were talking tattoos. I got my first tattoo in 2010, less than a month after my dad died, and in his memory. He was very devoted to the Sacred Heart, and that is the tattoo that I got at the top of my back with the words in Latin, Caritas vincit omnia, meaning love conquers all, even death. And every time I tell that story and I show that tattoo and I say that I did it in memory of my father, I like to also say that my dad turns in his grave because he hated tattoos, which is part of the reason that I waited until I was almost 41 to get my first tattoo. I also waited because I wanted my first tattoo and all of my tattoos since to be personal and meaningful. Not a random unicorn on my butt. You know who you are. I guess for me, tattoos are testimony, not decoration. They mark the moments that changed me. And my dad's death, after a brave but short 8-month battle with stage 4 lung cancer, changed me. And when I wrapped up treatment for my own cancer in 2017, I knew I needed a survivor tattoo. But it had to be right and not a pink ribbon. It had to be something meaningful and grounded in who I actually am. And it wasn't until early 2019, more than a year after finishing treatment, that it came to me that I felt like I had found my tattoo, my survivor tattoo. And I wish I could remember the exact origin story. I probably heard the phrase Tabitha Koum at Mass one Sunday. And for whatever reason, that particular time, even though I had heard that phrase many times over the years, that particular time it really landed and it just struck me. I do remember knowing immediately that would be my survivor tattoo and part of my survivorship story. And if you know me, you know I'm not a particularly patient person. I hate waiting. And after getting my first tattoo, I loved it so much. I thought for sure a second one would be coming soon. But no, it took almost 9 years and a cancer diagnosis, a moment I knew I wanted to mark, but I wasn't in a rush to do so. It had to be right and it had to be tied to my faith. So I waited, knowing that inspiration would come. If you haven't guessed by now, I was raised Catholic. And although faith was a choice made for me by my parents as an infant, it's been the water that I've swam in ever since, the water of faith. And I have, throughout my life, returned to that water again and again, always by choice, not out of a sense of obligation or a sense of culture. And I have my mother to thank for being the living example of what an authentic, chosen faith practice looks like. My earliest memories of faith, feeling real to me, go back to the nighttime routine that my mom and I had. She would put me to bed and we would pray, sometimes the rosary, meditating on different scenes from Jesus's life as recounted in the Gospels. And often when we prayed the rosary, we would follow that by a prayer called the Litany of Loreto, which is my favorite, not just of all litanies, but also of all prayers. Sometimes if she was tired or she was putting me to bed a little later than usual, we prayed an Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, and the Guardian Angel prayer, all in Spanish. And during Lent, every year, one of my favorite faith memories for me is during Lent, every year my mom, my 2 sisters, and I went to daily Mass for years. Even though I often spent that half hour, 45 minutes at Mass daydreaming, I remember being there in church with my sisters and my mom and seeing my mom pray and surrender all her worries to her faith and to God. And my earliest faith memories involving my maternal and paternal grandmothers are the same. My paternal grandmother had to use a walker for the last 10 to 15 years of her life, at least. And her rosary hung on it. Not as an accessory, like when you see a rosary hanging on a rear view mirror in cars sometimes, but as an expression of her faith, of her practice, of her prayer practice and her faith, as the thing that she reached for when she needed strength and comfort and patience. And I will tell you that none of these women, not my mother, not my grandmothers, were submissive or shrinking violets. They didn't clutch their rosary beads like some women clutched their pearls. They were women of action and women who also had to sometimes surrender and trust that all would be well because circumstances gave them no other choice. And their faith was part of that surrender. If you're listening to this podcast, you already know that cancer changes everything. Not just your body, but who you are, how you show up, and what you're supposed to do next. I'm Eileen Lopez Tomei, cancer survivorship coach and 10-year survivor. I work with Hispanic and Latina breast cancer survivors who are ready to stop white-knuckling through survivorship and start living from a place of peace. If that's you, let's talk. I have 3 one-on-one coaching spots open starting in the month of May. Book a free discovery call with me at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. The link is in the show notes. And I know I've already told you about my Abuela Ventura's rosary, my maternal grandmother's rosary. I carried it with me through every chemo session, through surgery and recovery, all 28 radiation treatments. And having them wasn't just for prayer. Sometimes I couldn't find the will or the desire or the energy to even pray. But by having her rosary beads with me, I was invoking her spirit, her strength, her resilience. And they also helped me to imagine her there with me. Maybe comparing cancer battle scars or exchanging cancer survivorship stories. I imagined her feeding me after chemo and clicking her tongue at the terrible sadness of it all while also encouraging me and probably making inappropriate jokes, always keeping it real. So my abuela's rosary gave me hope and peace and was a reminder to lean on my faith the way that she did, the way that my mom did. Do you have something like that? An object, a ritual, a poem, a prayer, a book, a person whose strength you draw on when yours runs out? I want you to think about that right now. What is your equivalent of a grandmother's rosary? There is a difference between the faith you're born into and the faith you choose. The faith you choose to practice and keep well after you don't have to answer to your parents on a Sunday to their demand to get up and get dressed because we're going to church. And it's an important distinction to make. And maybe you think my cancer faith story has a tidy little ending that has me quietly submitting to the will of God. Not so. My hermanas, not so. There were many moments after diagnosis and during treatment and a few years into survivorship when dealing with the fallout of treatment and surgery that I shook my fist at the sky and asked, why? Why me? Why? Why, God? Why would you bless me with a late in life baby and then allow me to have cancer? Why would you allow me to have breast cancer? I exclusively breastfed 4 of my 5 babies. Why? Why this? Why me? Why now? I wondered, is God still in this with me? My belief in him never wavered, but my faith was definitely shook. And as with other challenging times in my life, like when I was 20 and my cousin Kathy died in a terrible car accident at the age of 19, during my first awful marriage and the ensuing divorce, during my mother-in-law's and then my own father's battle with cancer that ended with their untimely deaths, I also shook my fist. I bargained and I begged for more time, for a cure, and even though those things didn't come, I chose to stay. Not naively, not without questions, but actively, showing up for my faith practice the way that it had shown up for and sustained me and my mother and my grandmother before me. That's the thing, right? It was a practice, a way to tell myself or reassure myself that there was a path forward. I don't want to say that maintaining my faith practice throughout cancer helped me to believe that there were better days ahead, because I want to say for most of my cancer treatment, I was not looking ahead. It was one of the times when I was most present in every single day and most aware of every single minute of every single day. But my faith practice did help me to keep moving forward and putting one foot in front of the other. And I know I'm not the only one who's experienced this or felt this way. The women that I work with as a survivorship coach and as a career coach and as a leadership coach often tell me that cancer or some other big life experience, even being pregnant and childbirth and labor and delivery, shook them, shook their faith, not destroyed it, but shook it. And part of the work we do together is figuring out what they actually believe now on the other side of that diagnosis or that big life-changing event, as opposed to what they were told to believe. My faith is different now than it was before cancer. It's more personal. It's less check the box, or less I go to mass because that's what I'm supposed to do, or I'm Catholic because that's what my parents were, or that's how I was raised. Those things are all true. It's just that now I'm also much more present in my own faith practice. It's more of an honest practice. I realize, you know what, God can take my hard questions and he welcomes them. He welcomes the conversation. My faith is more rooted in relationship than ritual, although ritual is very important to me, and I still go to mass because I need to and I want to, and because I'm called to, and I still love the rituals. They do matter, but I am more present in and for them, actively practicing them, if that makes sense, and not so much posturing Catholicism. And you know what? My faith asks more of me now than it did before. It requires me to see and not look away from the suffering of others. It requires me to accept and embrace that there's room for love and mercy and patience and non-judgment and suffering and loss and care for my neighbor, all of my neighbors. And my Tabitha Koum tattoo is emblematic of my faith. It's not just a phrase from the Bible that I hear read at church sometimes, or just a story about Jesus or a story about a miracle that he worked. It is a grown woman cancer survivor's declaration. Get up. Every day, get up. I'm going to pause here for just a second, because if what we've been talking about is landing for you, I want you to know there's somewhere you can take it. If you're a cancer survivor who's always been the strong one, and you're quietly wondering who you are now that everything has changed, you don't have to figure that out alone. I'm Eileen Lopez Tomei, cancer survivorship coach, and fellow survivor, and my coaching practice exists for women exactly like you. If today's episode is resonating and you're ready to go deeper, book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. The link is in the show notes. Okay, now let's talk about the other word that changed everything for me. There's faith and there's surrender. And if I'm being honest about this part of the podcast, then I have to start with a big ugh. That's because we're going to talk about this word. And if you know me, you know that I never surrender. And any of you that are listening now who do know me are chuckling right at this moment. Remember in the first couple of episodes of Sana Sana, how I told you that as a first-gen Latina, surrender sounds like losing. Maybe I didn't use the exact term surrender, but I remember telling you how the mantra for most Hispanic and Latina women, especially first-gen Latinas, is sé fuerte. It's not even ponte fuerte. Ponte fuerte means make yourself strong or get strong. It's sé fuerte. It's be strong. Be strong. And so right there, culturally, it's already kind of a problem to even contemplate surrender. And then layer on top of that I'm a lawyer and a public servant, the professional world that I've lived in, at least, in that world, surrender sounds like weakness. Win the case, zealously represent your client, meet your goals, work hard, be efficient, right? That's what being a lawyer, being a professional, being a public servant, a manager, a leader, an executive, that's what be strong means. But that's not what surrender means. Actually, let me show you something. So there's giving up. And there's surrender. Okay, so giving up to me invokes things like despair, makes me think of despair, of defeat, of quitting. And when I think of surrender, I think more of trust, there goes the cap, of release, and I think of not having to carry the load alone. I think of support. And to me, surrender comes from a place of faith, right? Like I explained earlier. So if you're grounded in a place of faith, whatever faith means to you, it's easier to think of surrendering. You're not giving up. You're not coming from a place of despair. You're not coming from a place of defeat. You're not quitting. You're coming from a place of trust. Surrender is releasing the outcome, not the effort, not the love, not the fight, the outcome. And for me, surrender without faith is giving up. The faith underneath is what ultimately makes surrender possible for me, as hard as it is for me to even actively imagine surrender. When I do finally get to that spot of trust and release and support, it's coming from a place of faith. And yeah, don't get me wrong, I fight it tooth and nail, but eventually it's faith in something, in someone bigger than me that allows me to surrender. And I don't have too many stories of surrender in my life. And not that I'm necessarily proud of that, especially where it cost me peace and good health. But I remember when I experienced surrender after my diagnosis. I wasn't giving up, but I remember calling my coach and shortly after I was diagnosed and telling her, I don't want to fight cancer because cancer is in my body. And if I'm fighting cancer, I'm going to be fighting my body, and I don't want to be at war with my body. And I also remember telling her, I'm tired. I'm so tired. And I'm not telling you I'm quitting. I just want to let go and not be the one who carries it all for me and for others for once. I want someone else to be the strong one for once. And my shoulders, which I'd been unknowingly holding in this permanent tight and tense shrug for so many years, just relaxed. And I felt like I could take a breath. Like I could take a full uninterrupted breath for the first time in years. The honest truth is that I'm still practicing surrender. I'm better at it some days and in some situations than others. Sometimes I catch myself gripping tightly to the steering wheel and reminding myself to let go. But more often than not, I'm not surrendering at all. I will slide right back into white knuckling through life. And on those days, I give myself tons of grace and remind myself that before cancer, I didn't even know that I was doing that. And at least now I'm catching myself. Back then, I thought I had no choice, that was the only way to do life, especially life as a mom, as a wife, and as a professional. And since I've become a coach in working with women, both cancer survivors and the career coach, the women that I've worked with struggle with this too, especially the strong ones, because surrender feels like a betrayal of who they are, of who they've told themselves they need to be. And part of our work together is redefining what strength looks like when you stop fighting what you cannot change. You know what it feels like in my body when I'm not surrendering? Just a few minutes ago, I described one way it feels, like the tense shoulders, like up to my ears. But I have other signals that tell me I'm drifting, racing thoughts at night, the list of things that I start to make that I tell myself only I can resolve. The insomnia comes back. All the muscles in my body, but especially my shoulders, get tight and tense. So I want you to just, if you're listening to this, I want you to just take a minute and stop and ask yourself right now, what is the one thing you are holding so tightly that your hands are tired? You don't have to put it down today, whatever that thing is. Just name it. Just bring awareness to that. So for me, in my own experience, I can't cleanly separate surrender from faith, and I don't want to. Because sometimes, most times actually, when I've surrendered, it's faith that has made surrender possible for me. Believing something larger was at work, let me let go. Sometimes I had no choice, and surrender came right at the beginning because whatever I was facing, like a cancer diagnosis for my dad or a cancer diagnosis for myself, faith just came right in and rushed to fill the space. It was my comfort. It was the thing that when I released and surrendered, the thing I grabbed onto was faith. And then there were times where neither felt available. And so neither surrender nor faith or surrendering in faith were available to me for whatever reason. And those times I would just hold my abuela's rosary and wait. I would wait for faith to lead me to a place of like peaceful surrender. And you know what? I have not learned to fully surrender yet. There are things that I am still holding or things that I've released that I go back to and I cling onto again. An example of that is I'm still holding the belief that I have the best advice, that I have the best answers for my adult kids and for the challenges in their lives. And that comes from a place of not just control, also fear, but also control. Like if they will just do what I tell them to do from my place of experience and wisdom, from a place that I know best, then they're going to be okay. So and that's just one example, plenty of examples in my life where I'm still working on learning and practicing surrender. And why am I telling you this? Because I don't think you're looking for someone who has it all figured out. I think you're looking for someone who's honest about still figuring it out and who keeps showing up anyway. Tabitha Koum is not a one-time command. For me, it's a daily invitation. And some days I look at that tattoo and I hear that invitation and I get up without a second thought, super easily. And some days I struggle and I hesitate to get up, cling to control. I think never surrender. And some days I get up because my faith says so and my tattoo reminds me. And on those days, that has to be enough. I want to bring us back to the story in the Bible of Jesus walking into this 12-year-old's room in which all hope seemed lost, and holding out his hand and saying simply, "Little girl, get up." Not when you're ready, not when you've healed enough, not when you're perfect enough or the circumstances are perfect or you've got everything under control. Now, from this place of uncertainty, from this place of not knowing, get up. And that's what I want for you. Not to wait until you feel like you have it all together. Just to get up now. Tabitha Koum, hermana. And until next week, sana sana. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Sana Sana, the show that helps you heal and restore the parts of your ecosystem that were depleted after a breast cancer diagnosis. If you liked the episode, please leave us a rating and review so we can reach more incredible survivors como tú who want to heal with us. If you want to stay connected with our growing community, check out our Instagram at Eileen Lopez Tomei Coach and share what part of the episode touched your heart today. See you next week.